Can't think of anyone better to talk to me more about this than former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder, who served under President Barack Obama. He's now the chair of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee, and he's the author of Our Unfinished March. Thank you so much for joining me here today. And I wanted to start with the bigger picture here. I mean, you have been at the highest levels of the judicial system for decades, but you may even be exhausted. I'm exhausted of all of this. Why does it matter to people to pay attention? Why should they?
Well, I think we have to pull back here. This is not only an attack, as you've described it, on the judicial system. It's actually a part of a larger piece, which is an attack on our democracy. The judicial system is one of the things that really distinguishes the United States and the American experiment from other governments. If you go after the judicial system, you are, in essence, going at the foundation of our country, of our democracy. And that is something I think too many Republicans are apparently willing to do, following the president, attacking our democracy. Every generation of Americans has been called upon to defend democracy, whether it is at Gettysburg or in Omaha Beach during World War II, from Selma to Montgomery. We have to defend our democracy in this moment, not be the first generation to fail to defend our democracy. And that means standing up for people like Alvin Bragg and these other prosecutors who are simply doing their jobs.
And I wanted to ask you about the Manhattan District Attorney. I mean, reportedly hundreds of threats against him. You've sat in versions of his roles over the course of your career. How damaging and how dangerous are these threats that are out there against him and have been building over the past several days?
Well, they obviously are dangerous because they can activate people who are outside of the system, who are actually outside the ambit of what the deputy attorney, what the district attorney is actually doing. It's going to have no impact within the district attorney's office.
He's not watching it himself.
Watch it, have some degree of understanding of it. Same thing with regard to Jack Smith and Merrick Garland at the Justice Department. That's not going to impact what it is that they're doing, but it can activate people outside of the process. You know, the lone wolves who will perhaps get, for whatever reason, feel that what Donald Trump is saying is actually real and then act upon it. That's the real danger.
Is the people who are watching now, because of January 6th, when Donald Trump started escalating his rhetoric, I was a little afraid. I'm sure a lot of people out there were. You oversaw law enforcement. How do they watch all of these threats, these building threats, what's happening online? What are they watching right now?
Well, insecurity goes up. You start to increase the interactions that you have with joint terrorism task forces. You start interacting more with state and local authorities, looking for intelligence, trying to find ways in which you can determine whether or not there are actual threats, actionable threats that you need to be concerned about, and then deploying resources to deal with them.
So they're going to watch it closely. And more so, do you think, because of January 6th?
Sure. I mean, we have to learn from January the 6th. And we can't forget, not only this, that he mentioned January 6th, he did this at Waco.
Yeah.
You know, 30 years or so after the Waco debacle there, where a bunch of people died, including, I think, 20 ATF agents. And so there's a whole bunch of things that happened in connection, a whole bunch of things you have to worry about in connection with what the former president did.
Now, when I saw that photo last night, my brother-in-law got married. I came home, I was looking at the coverage, and I almost thought I was seeing something fake. Donald Trump sitting there with footage of the January 6th insurrection behind him. If you're Jack Smith, do you watch that? Do you look at it? How do you consume that? Does it matter?
Yeah. Doesn't matter. You bring cases, as the Attorney General said, without any basis of fear or favor. You have to look at the facts, look at the law, apply those things, and then hold people accountable. If you don't hold people accountable in connection with January the 6th, that means at all levels, it is an indication to people in the future that they can do something like that and get away with it.
So even though Donald Trump seemed to double down on something he is under investigation for, it doesn't factor in?
No, I mean, that's his M.O. I mean, that's what he does. He tries to delay, he tries to intimidate, but he's run up against forces now that are not going to be intimidated. The United States Department of Justice, the Manhattan DA's office, the Fulton County DA's office, these are offices that are steeped in these kinds of things and will know how to respond, I think, appropriately.
I wanted to ask you, there was another letter, a second letter here. I read it last night, highlighted it. I'm a little bit of a nerd. That was sent by a bunch of Republican leaders in Congress, Jim Jordan being one of them, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. And they seem to kind of double down on both their request for documents and information on this state or this Manhattan DA case. And they also seem to suggest that they wanted to remove former presidents from being able to be prosecuted at all. Or that's kind of how I read it. I'm not a lawyer. Tell us a little bit about how uncommon this is, or is there ever a scenario where Congress should be seeking information from an ongoing state, local investigation?
I know of no instance where you've seen Congress asking about a state or local prosecution. They frequently will ask questions about federal prosecutions, and even those, they get the back of the hand to those, because you don't talk about ongoing investigations. The notion that, Jim Jordan, who ignored a subpoena to testify in the January 6th investigation, would now have the temerity to try to inject himself into a state local prosecution is the height of hypocrisy. And it'll be something that I'm sure that the DA will respond to. My guess would be it will be a much shorter response than the letter that actually was sent to him. It's not the kind of thing, you don't ignore it because you should give, the body, Congress, some degree of respect, but you're not going to take it seriously.
And do they have any authority to seek this information? It's very uncommon. But
no, I mean, what's the basis? I mean, Congress can do these things on the basis of enacting legislation. That's what the purpose of oversight is. What legislation are you going to enact that's going to have an impact on a state or local authority? Zero.
Now, I wanted to ask you also about Evan Corcoran, because he is, and this is just, I'm thinking of the questions my mother-in-law, my friends ask me. So he, this week, had to testify and there was a loss of attorney-client privilege here, where the conversations that he was having with Trump about these documents we've all heard so much about, no longer was he unable to talk about them. How significant is that?
Oh, it's extremely significant, and it's extremely rare. The question is, who ultimately made...
Do you know of other cases?
There have been instances where you've had to pierce the attorney-client privilege, but that's something that happens only in rare instances. And the ultimate question there is, who made the determination to tell federal authorities that all the documents that had been in the possession of the former president had actually been turned over? Is that something that the lawyers came up with, or is that something that the lawyers said at the direction of the former president? That's why you want to put Evan Corcoran in the grand jury. That's why you want to question him.
And what could they learn from this? You're not in it, but what kind of information could come out of their conversations?
Well, you could learn the answer to the ultimate question. If the ultimate answer from, and this is just hypothetical now, if Donald Trump told Evan Corcoran, there are no other documents, I want you to tell federal authorities that there are no other documents, and Evan Corcoran tells the young woman who actually put that letter together, then there is criminal liability on the part of the former president. And so if I'm Jack Smith, I want to know the answer to that question.
That could be the question. Now, I wanted to bring up, I share your mutual obsession with the Wisconsin State Supreme Court race, which is coming up early next month. If people haven't heard of it, They should pay attention. To me, it's the most important race happening this year. So tell us a little bit about the impact of that, the importance, and what the outcome could mean.
I think it's the most important race in 2023.
Agree.
I totally agree with you there.
Yeah.
The Wisconsin Supreme Court, Wisconsin has probably now the most gerrymandered state legislature in the country. It's a 50-50 state. Democrats have only about 35% of the state legislature, and that's strictly as a result of the way in which the lines were drawn. It's unbelievably gerrymandered. The Supreme Court in Wisconsin would have the opportunity, if a lawsuit were brought, to decide whether or not those lines as drawn were consistent with the Constitution of Wisconsin. But beyond that, there are the reproductive component to this case as well. There's an 1849 statute from Wisconsin that bars abortion in all instances. And the Supreme Court of Wisconsin is going to have to make a determination about whether or not that is constitutional. This race will decide whether or not you have a pro-progressive Supreme Court or a pro-conservative Supreme Court. It's 4-3 now in favor of the conservatives. If Judge Janet Protasiewicz wins, it would be 4-3 for progressives.
That sounds pretty significant.
It's extremely significant.
And how quickly could that all happen? Because redistricting, any chances of new maps would have to happen pretty quickly before 2024.
Yeah.
How quickly could they do something on abortion rights in Wisconsin should she win?
Well, the case about the 1849 statute is actually in the courts now, and that will be decided by the Supreme Court, I think, in a matter of months. Were there a lawsuit to be brought to say we need to be about the process of redistricting, you could do that probably in the course of 9 or 12 months, certainly well before 2024. So that race is extremely important in an extremely important state. Wisconsin is a swing state.
Yes, it definitely is. An evergreen one. Well, April 4th, we'll all be watching. We'll get updates from you, maybe. Attorney General Eric Holder, thank you so much for joining me and helping me answer a lot of the questions I've had about all these legal cases.
Thank you, and congratulations on the show.
Thank you so much.